was completely invisible. We could only know there was danger when you saw birds falling down and dying, the animals dying around.
The time is 10:30 p.m. on August 15th, 1984. A loud explosion is heard near Lake Nyos, a quiet body of water in West Province, Cameroon. From the crater in the eastern part of the lake, a gas cloud had emerged, dispersing through the nearby village like a mist. The villagers in the surrounding areas didn't think much of what appeared to be a fog, as its presence near the lake was a common occurrence. However, later that night, without an apparent cause, the people nearby began mysteriously collapsing to the ground with panic and desperation. The same thing happened with even cattle and livestock. Later, it was confirmed that 37 people had died an agonizing death due to asphyxiation, which means to be deprived of oxygen. When their bodies were found, it was observed that their skin was damaged with burns and slight discoloration. All of this was a result of the deadly gases contained in the mist. Additionally, trees, grass, and bushes were seen to be flattened beside the lake because of the explosion. The carbon dioxide levels near the lake, measured right after the incident, displayed an uncharacteristically high reading. And the question emerged, what could have potentially caused an explosion releasing this levels of toxic gas? Everything about the incident was so obscure and confusing to the Cameroonian authorities that they couldn't even give an explanation to the events that had unfolded. Little did the authorities know that they would face a much bigger headache later on. 2 years later, on August 21st, 1986, a similar occurrence had taken place, but on a much larger scale than the 1984 incident. A large explosion was heard around the surroundings of Lake Nyos, situated 315 kilometers away from the Cameroonian capital, Yaoundé. Like Lake Nyos, an immense cloud of gas spurted out of the water, containing between 100 to 300,000 tons of carbon dioxide and other poisonous substances. It spread throughout the sleeping villages of Cha, Nyos, and Subum, killing 1,746 people and around 3,500 cattle. On the other hand, approximately 4,000 villagers had survived and afterwards fled the surrounding areas. According to eyewitness accounts, the few survivors were transported to hospitals in surrounding cities, while the remains of the dead were buried in mass graves in the afflicted villages. A lot of theories surfaced following the 1986 disaster. A certain group of people, including survivors and villagers, argued that it was a consequence of some sort of failed secret experiment. Maybe an experiment from the Cameroonian government, perhaps. However, many villagers believed that it was a divine retribution or a punishment brought down by angered spirits. Furthermore, there were even concerns regarding the possibility of terrorist activity that could have taken place, with doubts about the usage of chemical weapons to cause disturbances in the lake. Regardless, scientists were able to refute all these theories by discovering what really happened. What happened at both Lake Nyos and Nyos is referred to as a limnic eruption, a very infrequent natural disaster involving carbon dioxide erupting from supersaturated lakes. Scientists would go on to describe the Lake Nyos incident as the earliest known large-scale asphyxiation caused by a natural event.
Carbon dioxide, which had been trapped for centuries, erupted from the lake in 1986, sending a poisonous cloud down valleys and into villages.
The scariest fact about all of this is that there is potentially a lake that could experience the same events as Nyos and Nyos, but on a magnitude never seen before. The consequences of such a disaster would be so detrimental that it could possibly be the most destructive natural disaster the world has ever seen. This is Lake Kivu, the 8th largest lake in Africa. Situated between the border of the Democratic Republic of Congo and Rwanda, it provides fresh water and transport to millions inhabiting the area and is even an energy source because of the extraction of methane from it. Although the lake is vital for both the DRC and Rwanda, it possesses an underlying threat that isn't accounted for enough. In 2005, it was discovered that Lake Kivu was supersaturated with carbon dioxide, just like Nyos and Nyos. However, Lake Kivu is 2,000 times bigger than Lake Nyos, with around 2 million nearby inhabitants being under threat from the lake exploding. Moreover, food insecurities may happen as a long-term consequence in such a scenario. What's really concerning is scientists estimate that an eruption here could happen every 1,000 years, and the previous eruption was thought to have happened somewhere between 3,500 to 5,000 years ago, insinuating that a limnic eruption from the lake is long overdue. To understand in more detail what unfolded, we must know about what lies beneath the ground. Both Lake Manoon and Nyos are crater lakes that lie on this active volcanic field. Over millions of years, the Oku volcanic field had produced substantial amounts of magma below the crust. Production of magma also caused an increase in the formation of CO2, a lot of which seeped into both the lakes, which is why they became supersaturated. As a result of this gradual buildup, extreme levels of pressure mounted, and a disturbance in the earth triggered the sudden release of all the CO2. Although there are disputes on what exactly the disturbance was, most believe that it was a direct result of a nearby landslide. The reason why people collapsed and died was because the toxic CO2 replaced the oxygen in the victims' lungs. Because carbon dioxide is a dense gas, 1.5 times denser than air in fact, the cloud hovered throughout the villages in low altitudes. This is the reason for majority of the survivors being people who lived higher up the hills, as the mist simply weaved between the valleys near ground level. The earlier mentioned wounds and burns discovered on the skin of the victims and survivors were a repercussion of CO2 poisoning. What has the Cameroonian government done to reduce the possibilities of a future disaster occurring? Lake Nyos had its first degassing pipe installed in 2001, with an additional 2 pipes fixed in 2011. Lake Nyos and Manoon are believed to be relatively safe now. However, there are fears about other lakes in the same volcanic line. 13 of the 43 crater lakes on Cameroon's volcanic line are deep enough to hold deadly gas concentrations, and 2 of them, Lakes Enep and Oku, are said to be hazardous. Unfortunately, not enough research has been done on the safety of nearby lakes in the area, and the outbreak of the Cameroonian Civil War in 2017 has curtailed the possibility of doing additional investigations. We can only hope the survivors in resettlement camps can return to their villages and restart their lives, and that extra measures are taken to reduce the likelihood of upcoming threats in the continent.